Hello, everybody, and welcome back to The Insider. This week, I'm delighted to be joined by Mat Barrow. Hello there, Matt.
Morning, how are you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. End of the week that has flown by just like the last 6 months, to be honest with you. So, yeah, blink and I've missed it. Matt, could you? I've known you a while, and I can do a bit of an intro, I'd imagine, but I could never do it justice. Could you give the listeners a brief intro to who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so currently I'm managing director at a company called XLab in Leeds, and we'll talk a bit more about them. Prior to this, I ran consultancies, grew and ran consultancies, so Infinity Works in London and then Manchester. And before that, I worked for the NHS on and off, kind of as an external for maybe 10 or so years. Really focused around agile delivery, transformation, trying to kind of impart change and do things better. So I was lucky enough to work on some big programs like Spine 2, and that was a really exciting thing. So I came to XLab probably 15 months ago now, 14 months ago. XLab had been relatively slow growing. It started kind of 12 or 13 years ago. Got some great people, really smart people, but they'd never really had the drive to grow and to do a lot. So I came with my sort of high growth ambitions and some ideas about what we might do, how we might take the company global, how we might develop the product, and so on. And then, of course, COVID happened. It's been a crazy 6 months.
Well, yeah. Well, you've been on the front line. I'm excited to talk about it. But how old's XLabs then before you joined them?
So I think the company was founded in 2006, but it came from a university project or a couple of university projects. And the idea was there was a very smart guy called Rick Jones who came up with the idea to integrate labs to improve the transmission of information between labs, which still now today around the world is a very manual, very paper-driven process. And of course, in the backdrop of something like COVID and a pandemic, you can't have that working. It's too slow. So Rick had this idea of digitally integrating all the labs, and there's a complexity around the standards. Nobody talks the same language. Even two labs with the same information and the same systems will call a test a different thing, or we'll process the test in a different way. So there's a lot of complexity around the standards and the integration, and that was what the company was trying to solve. So in the early years, they had some grant funding. They had a great level of support from the Corderdale and Huddersfield Foundation Trust, who were good enough to partner with XLab and help them through the early days. And then when I joined last year, we had around about 70 NHS customers across the UK,
Okay.
A national contract in Scotland. But it was really then a case of, well, how do we take this further? What next for it? How do we grow beyond that lab to lab space?
And you never saw it was coming at the beginning of this year. So I don't know how's. I guess the simple question is, how's your life been, and how's the business been since, I guess, the turn of the year?
It's been, I mean, everything's different. Everything's changed, of course, for everyone in this world. When I joined the business, it was very much people worked 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. People had desktops. Nobody had a laptop. Everybody worked in the office. There was very much a culture, I guess, kind of with the previous management team that you could only work in the office. You couldn't work remotely, and people couldn't be trusted to work remotely.
So, sounds like recruitment, Jesus.
So the kind of first 6 months, we were fixing that stuff, trying to impart much more of the cultures I've worked in the past were much more around no blame, about encouraging collaboration, encouraging, really supporting each other as a team, and getting away from measuring people's output by hours and focusing much more on actually what they contributed to the team. So then when COVID struck, all of a sudden, literally overnight, we had two things happen very quickly for the company. The first one was we had to shift to remote working. We had to work out what that looked like. And of course, for a company that had never done remote working, we didn't have collaboration tools. We didn't even have laptops. So people were, shipping taxis around shipping laptops and desktops and monitors around on buses and taxis in Leeds. But then at the same time, the NHS, we'd had a conversation with about how we could support, and we knew that the product we had would have been a critical part of the infrastructure if made available. So again, the NHS came to us and said, look, can we do this? Can we roll this out more significantly? You're already at 70% of the NHS. Let's get it to 100%, and then let's use it much more effectively.
And just quickly, is this around April time then? Is this early on they came to you?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So, and actually, I was at the country when most of this was happening. I was studying for an MBA, and I was out doing these workshops, and at the same time, kind of the NHS are talking about, can you scale up to this number and can you do this? And the numbers were, tens or hundreds of times the volumes we've seen previously.
Wow.
which required then a whole rethink of our architecture, rethink of technology, and of course the way we were doing things. The kind of historic approach of deploying software once a month that the company had been doing in the past just wouldn't stand anymore. And so now, 6 months later, we've got a full cloud architecture, fully integrated deployment pipelines. We could deploy many times a day, fully hands-off deployment, infrastructure as code, and so on. So all the good things you'd expect to see from a quality engineering pipeline. But it's taken some effort to get to that, and at the same time, as I say, trying to manage culture, mental health, caring about the individuals, and making sure that that's all okay.
Well, I think it's you've let's be honest, you've done the opposite to a lot of companies in the last 6 months. I think a lot of companies have maybe downscaled what they're doing, and in all across the business, whereas you guys, it sounds like you've had to very quickly kind of put a structure and strategy together in terms of how you're going to work, and then accelerate as fast as possible. So how's it things now then? So what in terms of the acceleration? I'm interested in the growth, I guess, over the last 6 months and the projects that with the NHS.
Yeah, so I guess in the UK, we're now processing something like 100 to 150 times the number of messages per day than we were doing back in March, and of course with Moonshot and other things coming up, that's likely to increase further. The big change, I guess, has been how we work, how we support the service. So we've gone from being, as I say, 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, to to critical national infrastructure that requires 24/7 support. That's required some changes within the development team and how we think about things. It's required people to kind of, I guess, step up and provide a bit more ownership, but also to how we work with those people and how they get supported. There's obviously a risk when people are working from home anyway that they don't put the laptop down. They work till late at night, and you don't get a proper break. So we've been trying to maintain that balance and make sure that people do get the break. So we have the cover for the customers, but also we don't overload people and burn people out. In terms of the general growth, we're probably 50% bigger as a company in terms of number of staff.
Sorry, again, is this kind of like from April time? Wow.
Yeah. So we've onboarded quite a lot, recruited quite a lot. And then beyond that, we've brought in 2 consultancies to help us with sort of specialist design consultancy to help with we're rewriting the UI to make that process better, and a bit of additional capacity from a consultancy who do kind of engineering work. So that was I guess a necessary expansion just to be able to keep up with things. We focused our team on the stuff that we know really well, and then allowed the external people to help with kind of the around the edges and improving the stuff that they know really well. We've also then started expanding into the US, the Middle East, and Australasia at the same time. So we hired a couple of kind of overseas salespeople to work on that pipeline. The nature of the platform we have is that it is global. It's not a localized thing. You can connect any system to any system. So we're talking to a hospital in the Middle East, for example, that wishes to send I guess genomic samples back to the UK, wants to send proficiency testing off to the US, and then has some reference lab customers in the US as well, and we see this across the world. I mean, when I was back in March, April time, I was talking to a lab down in Paris, and we went for a tour around the lab, and I saw a sample they had that was being processed, and the sample had come from Vietnam. It had been taken from a Vietnamese patient, written in English in the manifest, handwritten, of course, in English as a manifest. Then somebody who spoke French had manually typed the English into French in the system to then be processed, and then the same thing happens in reverse. So this is a really slow, awful process. And so they loved the idea, but that there's a challenge about how we keep the momentum going, how we keep supporting the customers and grow at the rate we need to grow, without breaking what we're doing in the UK, because that's the most critical thing at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm interested. So 50 growing by 50%, especially in these times, is pretty, well, I say impressive. It sounds like a necessity as well. I talk a lot on my podcast about kind of interviewing and onboarding. Something that I'm actually finding now is it seems strange. Candidates are starting, or engineers are starting their positions, interviewing and onboarding on online, starting positions, and actually now people are beginning to move on from without ever stepping into the office, which it just seems crazy. How are you? I mean, I'm interested in. I'm going to guess that the majority of the guys that you've placed have been through your network. How have you kind of found the challenge of the interview and onboarding, but mainly, more importantly, keeping the collaboration and the innovation within the team? Because I'm going to guess they're working in different locations remotely.
Yeah, I mean, the really nice thing has been that Leeds is a very competitive market. So we have some big consultancies, we have big gaming companies in Leeds. So hiring in the Leeds market was always quite hard for us. We were a smaller player. I mean, the work we do is very interesting and exciting, but it's hard to compete with some of the numbers that the others can play. This has allowed us to have a much more, I guess, a much more broad net. We can recruit from a much broader pool. There are colleagues and friends who I've worked with in the past. You're right in terms of the network. Most of the people that we've hired have been from my network or from their networks. And it's been a case of that, this person I worked with 6 years ago, who I really liked, and then moved to, the top of Somerset. Well, he's now available. He couldn't have been, he couldn't have driven here to work in the office previously, but now that everyone's remote, that's absolutely fine. And not just within the UK. We got there's a good friend of mine who moved out to Australia, and again, that wouldn't quite work before. But when you think about things like 24/7 service, well, having someone who's Australia based is brilliant for us. That works well. So that's been a challenge in terms of the interview process. I think in the early days, in the first month or so, where it was all new to everyone and nobody's really used to using Zoom and Google and so on, it was uncomfortable. It was a slightly awkward thing. Now it's kind of second nature. It's almost now the point that when you meet someone face to face, it's awkward. And you're like, they're here now. So no, it's not really a problem. We things like tech tests. We kind of worked around that sort of challenge. We've worked around the tech interviews, and broadly speaking, what we're kind of most interested in at the moment is can people work in this way? Can people work over Zoom? If you can't work on a video call and you can't interview over a video call, then it's not going to work as a collaboration. It's just not going to be right. And so when it comes to kind of collaborations, we've got we have certainly a daily stand up for the management team. We've got stand ups for all the individual teams. We do things like yesterday afternoon we're writing a proposal for another piece of work for the NHS at the moment. So we just set up a Zoom call, 6 or 7 of us kind of jump in now. We're kind of working on our own, but it was a bit like when we did that kind of collaboration room previously. You'd all sit around a table.
Yeah, exactly.
You can work on your own laptops, but every now and again you can chuck in a question, and it's the same. I think the challenge has been whiteboards. We've all missed whiteboards, and actually being able to just sort of stand at a whiteboard and draw some stuff and move some stuff around is a really hard thing. And there is the technology for whiteboards. None of it's particularly brilliant from what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I'd agree with that.
I've just kind of missed the whole of a pen. But that's probably been the biggest challenge. But I said it's countered by the fact that we have now got people who are spread all over the country, and that's been great for us.
Yeah, I think post-it notes have probably gone down in sales as well over the last 6 months, haven't they? People not being able to stick them on the old whiteboards. How's so in terms of you were geographically? Then I'm interested because I know you from obviously working in London. I know you're based up in Yorkshire. The team are mainly structured. Obviously, the chap in Australia, but the team's mainly structured in different parts of the UK. Do you find much? How's the collaboration from maybe almost like a geographical diversity point of view? People maybe, I guess that personally, I've recruited in Leeds in the past, probably for the companies you're talking about, to be honest. And I find it different. Engineers in Leeds seem to be different engineers in London. So do you find that when you?
Yeah, and it's brilliant actually. I mean, people. Historically, diversity is a huge important thing to most people, hopefully all people in time. For us, it's always been historically around racial, gender, maybe age diversity, but maybe over the last year when I joined the company, we were looking much more about kind of background diversity. So things like we hired a couple of people who were English grads or geography grads who had just a very different mindset to the rest of us. And then with what's happened over the last kind of 6 months, being able to open up that geographic diversity as well, that changes the picture once again. So you're absolutely right. People in London do think differently to people in Leeds and people in, broadly speaking, people in but also there's people who are kind of just in the middle of the countryside. They have a different mindset. I've got a guy I know really well who lives up in Cumbria, and lovely chap, really good. He doesn't want to be working in the centre of London, but he's got all the same sort of skills and capabilities. He's able to do that stuff. So we've been able to get to people like that who otherwise, if we'd had to have people based in the office, you just wouldn't have access to those people, and that opens up a whole different way of thinking, a whole different viewpoint that really benefits the company.
How do you look after your staff? I think it sounds as though you've got a very collaborative team. So in terms of the innovation, I feel like you've got a culture that's set that hopefully you can add to as you grow. something that's obviously really important is the mental health, and you touched on it there. How do you look after your staff that maybe you can't see and you don't speak to them as often, and when you do, it's maybe in a Zoom call or on a stand up with other people? How do you make sure that you guys are okay?
Yeah, and there's a lot of sort of non-verbal cues that you get around the office that you wouldn't get otherwise.
Yeah.
So just sitting at my desk previously, I could see that such and such seems a bit quiet today, or seems a bit maybe a bit more noisy, but not in the way that I would have expected. And you can have a coffee with them and have a chat and sort of see how things are going, and perhaps they open up and tell you something that then helps with that sort of thing. Of course, when you work remotely, you don't have that, and it's probably the most important part of my role is looking after the people and making sure that the people in the team stay healthy. The other stuff, people can look after the contracts, the sales, or the technology for me. That's all fine, but fundamentally making sure that everyone is sort of safe and well, both from a mental and a physical perspective, is really important. We've done different things. We've done kind of virtual coffees. We've had small things like we have a pub evening on a Friday evening, a virtual pub. So we got a Google Meet that people can come along to have a drink, not a drink if you don't drink, and just have a bit of a chat about stuff. So that happens every Friday evening. We've had, in fact, this maybe next Friday actually, we have a virtual quiz, like a team quiz that we're doing. These sorts of things. We're trying to keep up the social stuff alongside it. What's been quite hard is how we celebrate success, and doing that is really quite difficult. So again, we've done things like send out a celebration bottle to people, and then everybody kind of jumps on a call and opens a celebration bottle at the same time. Back in the early days, my kids assumed I must be a personal trainer because I spent almost all of my time asking people if they've been for a walk today. Thing. But that's been really important. Again, I think it's all well and good for people to say to each other, make sure you get some time off, make sure you get a break. If people think that they're taking time away from work to do that stuff, it's a bit hard. And I think when people aren't traveling to the office or traveling home from the office, when they're not walking out to get lunch and so on, there is a tendency for people to sit at the desk from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. and not think about it. So again, trying to encourage people to one of the guys in the team, I won't name him, but one of the guys in the team this week's looked pretty tired. So just, go and have a sleep for a couple of hours. Just take a couple of hours off. If you don't need to do that thing, just don't worry about it. And kind of getting across to people that there's no shame in doing that, to taking some time off themselves is okay. That's really important. And that can only really come from the top. That's not something that's, people at the bottom. If you're just kind of taking the afternoon off to go and have an afternoon nap without your manager or your leader's permission, it sort of feels a bit sneaky. Fast, but doing it this way, where actually this is the right thing for the company. Go and have a break. Is really important.
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I think I think it's always very, very important to hey, how you doing? Making sure the communication level's there. I think and I think the gifts are the things that I did myself. I think it's a good idea. It's the right thing to do. I think that the interesting challenge that people face is, when you're onboarding and remote, and you can't build up that kind of rapport from having a beer, and if you do, I don't drink, if a coffee, what have you, but that rapport and then being comfortable to ask the question, Matt, I need some time out. And I think that it's about creating that environment and culture where your staff are comfortable and they will approach and they will say that. And I think that can only come from it coming the other way first. Are you okay? How's your day going? Anything you can do? That then people are more comfortable to be able to say, actually, by the way, Matt, I need a bit of time, maybe when you're not expecting it. So no, fantastic. What's the you've had a crazy 6 months, and this isn't slowing down. How's the next 6 months looking? What do you think is going to happen next?
I mean, we were trying to do a 5-year plan a couple of months ago, and at the end we just gave up. It was impossible. I think the next 6 months for us, we're really excited about the US and Australasia, particularly opportunities. I think the Middle East and Asia will pick up a little bit, but we've got 6 or 7 really exciting opportunities in the US. I'm hoping that will be the next thing for us. And of course, what's going on in the UK, we've got things like machine learning and AI to look around capacity management, longitudinal care records, reporting of things, and really, we're working. There's a couple of government teams at the moment have been set up to really improve this kind of test process. How do we scale it up? How do we make it not something that people are talking about in the news every day, but a really cool process. So more of that, really helping those guys do the great work they are.
Fantastic. Well, listen, thank you very much for your time. Really appreciate it. I say it to everybody. I'm looking forward to actually having a proper catch up at some point down the line. So I really appreciate your time. Hopefully everyone's taken something from this, and yeah, look forward to speaking to you soon.
That's great. Thanks, Ben.